It is our contention that once we began to animate static objects and images, and once we began to infuse imagery and inanimate objects with motion, creating motion pictures and motion objects, the stage was set to elicit ever more powerful emotions through motion that could captivate more people more rapidly. But I don't want to suggest that things changed too drastically. As Dutton says, quote, "Because film and video loom so large in our experience today, it's easy to overestimate their importance. People who are enchanted by movies and electronic media, but are strangers to traditional live theater, usually have little idea of the visual spectacle theatrical production could offer audiences as far back as the Renaissance. Visual extravaganzas did not begin with Hollywood, but very likely amazed audiences in Paleolithic caves, with firelight and cave echoes providing their special effects." End quote, page 133. And this statement echoes the ideas of Pfeiffer about how cave paintings would have been used by tribal elders to initiate younger members of the tribe into adulthood through an archetypal hero's journey. When mythologist Joseph Campbell created in 1987 a PBS special with Bill Moyers called The Power of Myth just before his death, he famously analyzed The Wizard of Oz and Star Wars using the hero's journey based on his best-selling 1949 book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. His analysis revealed that the structure and the theme of the journey have been used throughout all of human history and resonate across all cultures and most likely have evolutionary origins. Hollywood screenwriters like George Lucas have credited Campbell for helping them use the universal archetypes and plots to create works of mass appeal. And you can't take a screenwriting course today without exploring the development of plot and characters through the hero's journey. But Campbell reminded us, and Dutton and Wilson and Tankersley concur, that with or without Hollywood special effects, it is the strength of the plot that really moves us. The rest is elaborate window dressing. For this reason, a single person with no theatrical training and no costumes and props can still command an audience telling a great tale by the campfire. And the idea that story is the true moving engine of emotion was confirmed to me when, as an acting student at the British American Drama Academy in London in 1987, I went with my class to an avant-garde minimalist production of Shakespeare's Macbeth, delivered by only 2 actors with 2 chairs dressed in black on a completely featureless black stage. Translated through the filters of our evolutionary psychology, it had the same emotional impact as a full production, if you were attuned to and attentive to it. In a sense, the criticism against picture books and comic books and blockbuster movies has merit. The masses are by and large poorly trained to appreciate the subtleties of subtle performance and usually need the out loudest forms of thinking we can think of to get fully emotionally engaged. We do use visualization and animation and special effects and sound effects as emotional crutches to keep us involved in many dramas. But it is fair to say that our ancestors were able to experience the same range of emotions when confronted by other humans thinking out loud as we do today. We haven't changed that much. And even with today's immersive video games, as Dutton points out, quote, "Fans also overrate the contribution to storytelling as an art form. Video games are complicated," he acknowledges, and visually arresting forms of make-believe that allow viewers to jump into the stage and participate in the action. This is regarded by video game enthusiasts as an earth-shaking advance. In a way, though, it is less an extension of storytelling art than a regression to its precursors, because while the themes and content of video games may be complex and adult, the logic of viewer participation in the story reverts back to the child's tea party with teddy bears. Video games are first and foremost games, with rules for participants and the attention-maintaining quality of uncertain outcomes. Now think on that for a moment. The attention-maintaining quality of uncertain outcomes. The evolutionary advantage of communicating our thoughts on how to live sustainably in the Pleistocene was all about getting the attention of other members of our tribe or clan or species to learn lessons from the past that could help us deal with uncertain outcomes in the future. Storytelling, with its plots and tropes and characters, evolved as an ever easier methodology for maintaining attention by providing certain structures to grapple with uncertainty. The story arc of the hero's journey has moments of tension and moments of relaxation, so that listeners or viewers or players can stay engaged but not get so emotionally exhausted that they quit learning. Without story, as many students know only too well, a deluge of instructional information can make your mind go numb. Information overload inhibits learning. Cramming for exams makes your mind go blank shortly thereafter. Dry facts and factoids lack a scaffolding to stay in place in the brain and get pushed out by new and more vital information. On the other hand, too much drama can hijack your amygdala and shut down your neocortex, throwing you into the panic of the fight or flight response. This is also bad for true learning. What you retain may only be the fear itself or some trauma that keeps you from exploring further. And so we humans evolved fiction. Once we learned to speak and could communicate the fictions going on in our heads in a structured, understandable way, the stage was set for each generation to figure out better ways to amplify those stories in ever more compelling ways so as to capture the attention of as many ears and eyes and hearts and minds as possible. The raw elements of storytelling, however, have remained very much the same. And experiments in Dadaism notwithstanding, almost every culture returns to these deeper structural similarities every time, regardless of the technology used to tell the stories. We are still cavemen and cavewomen, or as postmodern philosopher Bruno Latour says in his book of the same title, we have never been modern. Knowing this, we have to ask ourselves what the function of a documentary is, how, if at all, it differs from a docudrama, and where and when fiction can more effectively convey fact than a supposedly realistic or verifiable reportage. For sure, science must be impartial, objective, falsifiable, and statistically significant. We can tolerate no fake news or misinformation, much less deliberate disinformation. But communicating science effectively is an art. We don't tell stories to one another about scientific observations without an agenda. This is particularly true in the sustainability field, where we by and large think we know what is good and what is bad, despite Shakespeare famously cautioning us, there is nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. In the past, our histories have, as I've pointed out time and time again, been mostly his stories, the tale of tyrants and conquerors and wealthy privileged observers, mostly male. Without writing her feminist utopia Herland in 1915 to tell a compelling herstory lesson about an isolated society composed entirely of women who reproduced via parthenogenesis, resulting in an ideal social order free of war, conflict, and domination, how would any audiences living in that overtly patriarchal time have conceived of, much less paid attention to, ways to make such a sustainable society possible in the real world? From whence could they have learned their lessons, given that records of most matriarchal societies were deliberately erased from history, with books describing them often burned along with women considered witches at the stake? When the stakes are high, fiction is often the only way to think out loud. As I said, Thomas More did it when he wrote his classic Utopia in 1516 and still ended up getting beheaded years later for dreaming of a life without war, conflict, and domination. The Russian dissident Zanyatin tried it in his 1921 fictional novel We, considered the grandfather of the satirical futuristic dystopia genre, and was forced to emigrate. Former Disney Imagineer Joe Tankersley does it in his 2018 quasi-fictional, quasi-documentary novel Sustainability Manual, Reimagining Our Tomorrows, Making Sure Your Future Doesn't Suck, and so far hasn't gotten any flack for it, but with the oligarchy and its political cronies doing everything they can to block our achievement of a net zero carbon future so well explored in the book, you can never be certain. So this brings us to the urgency of our quest for communicating sustainability and why you should understand all the archetypal characteristics and plots and tropes and techniques, as well as be able to employ every possible technology for thinking out louder and louder to grab and hold the attention of the widest variety and highest number of humans possible, and non-humans if you can. You are used to taking fact-laden quizzes and exams and writing well-referenced fact-laden papers. Good on you, mate. But how can you now better communicate your findings and ideas? How can you use motion to create emotion in your work? What emotion should a vision of sustainability evoke? How do you use motion to achieve this? In this module, it's time to question and own up to your motives and create motion pictures to tell an emotive story. You can make a documentary or a docudrama or a speculative fiction as long as it is grounded in science. Just be clear that, like all good scientific thinkers, to be transparent about your biases.